Ladies and gentlemen, I am Brigadier Niladri Shankar Mukherjee. I'll be acting as the Major Domo for the evening's proceedings. I'm also the Secretary of the Society SIRCAR, that is Center for East and Northeastern Regional Studies, Kolkata, the society which is organizing this memorial lecture today. And today's R.K. Dutta Memorial Lecture, as you know, is being delivered by Honorable Shri JAWHAR SIRCAR, Rajya Sabha MP. And the event is sponsored by Numaligarh Refinery Limited, a Government of India undertaking, and a PSU, of which late Ranjit Kumar Dutta was first CEO and MD. And Bengal Club has been very kind enough to allow us to host the event at the club premises. I will now call upon the dignitaries to take their chairs on the podium. I invite Lieutenant General John Ranjan Mukherjee, Param Vishis Seva Medal, Ati Vishis Seva Medal, Vishis Seva Medal retired, former Chief of Staff of Headquarters Eastern Command, and also former GOC 15 Corps, author, a columnist, and an expert on the Northeast issues. Sir, would you just please come up and take your seat on the podium? He is also the president, the current president of our organization, SIRCAR. I now invite Mr. Joyantu Narayan Chaudhary, IPS retired. He's been the former DGP of Assam, also the Director General of the National Security Guard, has been an independent director of GAIL, and he's now the Vice President of our organization and member of the Governing Council. Sir, would you please take your seat? I now also request the President of Bengal Club, Mr. J.P. Khaitan, to please come up on stage. You all know Mr. Khaitan very well, a legal luminary who's a senior advocate practicing in the High Court and the current President of the Bengal Club. He's been kind enough to allow us to hold this select memorial lecture at the club premises. I also request now Mr. Subir Chakravarti to kindly join us on the podium. Mr. Chakravarti is now the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Exide Industries Limited, an alumni of the IIT Mumbai and IIM Kolkata. He is also on the board of a number of corporate entities. Finally, I'll request our chief guest today, Mr. JAWHAR SIRCAR, Rajya Sabha MP, and our chief guest to occupy his chair on the dais. Ladies and gentlemen, before I proceed any further, may I call upon one of our senior most members, who and her husband were our founder members of our organization, Mrs. Roma Bhagat, to please come up, ma'am, and give a bouquet and to Mr. SIRCAR and felicitate him. She's our senior most member of our organization, and very active. She comes for all our events and functions. I would request you, ma'am, to hand over to Mr. JAWHAR SIRCAR. Sir, please. Before the chief guest delivers his memorial lecture, a short brief interlude of three speakers who will say their piece insofar as this memorial lecture is concerned. I firstly request Mr. Khaitan, the President of Bengal Club, to say a few words. Sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the 2024 edition of the R.K. Dutta Memorial Lecture on behalf of the Research Center for Eastern and Northeastern Regional Studies, Kolkata, a premier think tank for Eastern and Northeastern issues. We have gathered here for a significant and timely discussion on a topic that holds immense importance in the context of our nation's future. Can renewable power really win in India? This question encapsulates the aspirations, challenges, and potential that lie ahead in the pursuit of sustainable and clean energy solutions. The question before us is not merely academic, it is a call to action, a summons to explore innovative solutions that can propel India toward a sustainable, resilient, and low-carbon future. The question posed today is not merely a theoretical inquiry, but a reflection of the choices we must make as a society to ensure a greener, cleaner, and more sustainable future for generations to come. We are honored to host our speaker, Mr. JAWHAR SARCAR, Rajya Sabha MP, former Culture Secretary of Government of India, and former CEO of PRASAR BHARATI, covering all India radio and Doordarshan. Mr. SARCAR will delve into a pressing issue that demands our immediate attention. Sir, I request you to take this forward. Thank you.
May I now request our President, General Mukherjee, to give his welcome address.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. JAWHAR SARCAR, Mr. Shobhit Chakraborty, Mr. J.P. Khaitan, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, welcome to today's talk by Mr. SARCAR on Can Renewable Power Really Win in India? The subject is very pressing and very important to all of us. And I'm more than sure total justice would be done to the subject today. Before I start, a few thanks. Firstly to Mr. Bhaskar Jyoti Hukon, the Managing Director of Numaligarh Refinery, Mr. Nikunja Borthakur, the General Manager of Numaligarh Refinery, and Mrs. Madhu Chanda Adhikari, the General Manager Corporate Communication of Numaligarh Communications. They've all been very helpful, and over the last 2 months we've been in close contact in order to get this lecture going. Mr. Ranjit Dutta was a very close friend, and along with us a founder member of this organization, SNSK. The next person I'd like to thank is Mr. Shobhit Chakraborty for very kindly agreeing to give you an insight into the subject of renewable energy, on which he's an acknowledged expert. I'd like to thank Mr. J.P. Khaitan and his team at Bengal Club for having been so kind as to join us in hosting today's event. And all of you, ladies and gentlemen, who've come to attend today's event in Kolkata's present weather conditions. Now, what is SNSK? SNSK is the Center for Eastern and Northeastern Regional Studies, based in Kolkata. In fact, we were the only think tank based in Kolkata which was recognized by Delhi. And the subjects we have really looked at is everything pertaining to the Eastern Hemisphere, including Eastern India, Northeastern India, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the oceans related to these areas. And we delve into not only security aspects, all aspects of security, all aspects that affect national strategy related to these aspects. And we carry out a fair amount of research and delve into these subjects in a fair amount of detail. Our members consist of some retired IAS officers, IPS officers, Army officers, naval officers, Air Force officers, some academic professors, and some industrialists. And we're very grateful for their inputs. We purposely kept our organization small, limited to just about 50, because we really don't want to be that large and step on each other's toes. We want to really do whatever we can. We are not funded by anyone. We fund ourselves by donations and sponsorship from industry where relevant. And we've purposely done that and insist on no government sponsorship so that we can speak our mind and do what we wish to do. And therefore we've been lucky. We've got away with everything we say, and we're very blunt and frank. And we've been submitting reports on all our seminars, all our discussions and lectures to the Government of India, all the relevant departments and the state governments, wherever necessary. And we've been very fortunate in that they've accepted at least 75% of our recommendations, which I think is very fortunate. We are recognized by the MEA as a think tank in Eastern India. We hold our meets all over the northeastern India in all the states, seminars, lectures, as also in Calcutta. This lecture was actually supposed to be hosted in Guwahati, and we were hoping to get the Chief Minister of Assam to do it. But he is far too involved in other matters at the moment, so he's declined. I would now like to hand you over back to the MC so that he can brief you on the coming events. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, before I ask the next speaker to take the stand, the President mentioned that we accept no sponsorship from government agencies. The only exception we have made is to the Numaligarh Refinery Limited, which is a Government of India undertaking, as you know, primarily because the first chairman, CEO and chairman and managing director of this organization was the late Ranjit Kumar Dutta, whose memorial lecture we are holding today, and he was our founder member, and therefore he's been our corporate member. This organization has been our corporate member from the time we have become a society. I now request our next speaker, Mr. Joyantu Narayan Chaudhary, to give you a profile picture of what Ranjit Kumar Dutta was to us as a member of the Governing Council, as a founder member, and also he held, if you remember, cabinet minister status in the Assam government when he was the managing director of Numaligarh Refinery Limited. Mr. Chaudhary.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ranjit Kumar Dutta was not a prominent politician. He was not a corporate tycoon. He didn't get a Padma Shri or Padma Bhushan. The legacy that he left was of goodwill to all whose lives he touched. Our families came from the same town in Assam, Dibrugarh. So growing up, I knew of him. He was from a very distinguished family. And I knew that his academic credentials were impeccable, from St. Paul's, Darjeeling, from St. Stephen's. And his wife, Julie, she was also belonged to a very, very well-known family. Her grandfather was a very, very well-known author, poet, historian, and a distinguished academic of Assam. I first met Mr. Ranjit Dutta when he was heading the Assam Oil, which at that time had a huge footprint in the northeast, petroleum oil lubricants. And it was the first refinery in Assam. Because that's where, if you remember the story, that's where oil was first found in India. You've heard the story of Dig Boy Dig, the elephant, and they found the oil seeping from the ground, and then the British started oil exploration there. I was a young SP, and in those days, Assam was going through a very turbulent period in the early 80s. There were constant bans, blockades, and the supply of petrol and diesel for our police fleet was uncertain. So I sought an appointment with him, and he gave me an appointment. He listened to me. He didn't say a thing. The meeting was very brief. And he said, I'll see what I can do. And a team from the Assam Oil came to my district headquarters, Lakhimpur. And in a short while, I had a petrol pump in my own police reserve. And as a bonus, we could use the commission from the sale of petrol and diesel for our police welfare activities. Later, I was fortunate to marry his niece, my lovely wife. And we met more often over the years. He was the epitome of humility and ever ready to help. Later, towards the end of my career, when I was heading the National Security Guard, I asked him for some help for the welfare. You probably have heard of the personnel of the National Security Guard. They're known as the Black Cats. They're the premier counter-terrorism unit of the government of India. And without hesitation, he gave money for their welfare activities. Professionally, his career height was when he set up the Assam Accord refinery at Numaligarh in record time. He was the founder managing director. And his approach was very innovative. There was very heavy machinery to be transported from the port here in Kolkata. And the roads just couldn't take it. He hired dredgers from Bangladesh. They deepened the river Dhansari. They made special jetties. And that's how they took all the heavy equipment there. He was not an engineer, not an MBA, just a history graduate from St. Stephen's. But what he had was that he had this talent. He could identify the key issues in any problem. He could recognize talent and nurture it. And he could weld a team together. Always staying in the background, always projecting his subordinates. And his wife Julie, with her social skills, she helped build up a community. Personally, he was very generous. He used his inherited wealth to educate many children, right up to graduation in the best institutions in India and abroad. He gave jobs he helped so many children to get jobs. And even after retirement, he retired as the chairman and managing director of Oil India. And then he split his time between GOVT and Kolkata. And he continued his philanthropic activities, one of which, as General Mukherjee mentioned, he saw Seners K as something needed, a think tank that focused on strategic issues in East and Northeastern India. And he and Julie very soon became part of the social circuit in Kolkata, including the Bengal Club. Sadly, he died. He was a victim of COVID. And his wife Julie had predeceased him after battling cancer for several years. They had no children. So this lecture that has been instituted by Seners K keeps the memory alive of a perfect gentleman and a generous benefactor. Let us celebrate his life today by listening to this oration by Mr. JAWHAR SIRCAR. Enjoy the evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhary. Thank you for profiling the life and times of Mr. Ranjit Kumar Dutta and bringing alive his memories. He was a very valued member of our organization. It was tragic to lose him the way he passed away during the COVID times. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of the memorial lecture that we have chosen for ourselves is, Can Renewable Power Really Win in India? The brochure we have circulated carries a concept note on the subject, but that need not be the last word on the subject. We are happy and grateful to our next speaker, Mr. Shubir Chakraborty, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Exide Industries Limited, who has kindly accepted our request to briefly explain the essential aspects of the topic to us all before the Chief Guest delivers his lecture. Mr. Shubir Chakraborty.
Dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all of you. I must thank the Research Center for Eastern and Northeastern Regional Studies, Kolkata, for inviting me today. I'm delighted to be here for two reasons. Number one, this topic is very close to my heart, and I could perhaps speak on this topic for hours on end, but I will not do so today. And the other reason being that I was told by my friend G.M. Kapoor that this is a think tank. In today's daily life, we tend to act first and think later. So since this is a think tank, I thought I might jive well with this body, which perhaps thinks first and acts later. Before I start, my salutations to all the defense personnel who are here today and those who are not, because I think they are doing a fantastic job in our borders, keeping us all hale and hearty, civilians like us. And no amount of thanks really suffices for the kind of work that they do. The topic for today is, Can renewable power really win in India? The chief guest, Mr. JAWHAR SIRCAR, certainly will be dealing with the contemporary issues. But I thought I would take you down the lane of history. Why has this topic suddenly become so important? 25 years ago, nobody would really invite anyone to talk on this topic. But today, every other seminar or conference is addressing this topic. Why is that so? Global risks rank by severity over short and long term. There is a body called GPRS, which has captured insights from 1,500 global experts, and this body is facilitated by the WEF, or the World Economic Forum. So the findings are quite startling. If you look at a 2-year period ahead of us, then in the ranking of global risks, misinformation and disinformation comes first, and extreme weather events come second. This is over a 2-year period. If you look at a 10-year period, then extreme weather events comes number 1. And for some strange reason, misinformation and disinformation is now ranked 5. Perhaps 10 years from now, we will not be having so much of misinformation amongst our mates. Now, if you look at the historical perspective, humans have inhabited this earth for around 200,000 years, initially existing for bulk of this period as hunter-gatherers. Around 12,000 years ago, humans were able to master agriculture, which led to stable, sedentary social living. During this entire period of 12,000 years that humans were involved in agriculture, the temperature of the earth barely rose 1 degree Celsius. Actually, less than 1 degree Celsius, the average temperature. However, the last 200 years, where we have seen industrial revolution, we have seen rising global incomes, energy usage, water usage, paper production, transportation, telecommunications, etc., etc. This period is also called the Great Acceleration. And this has, along with the conveniences that we enjoy today, it has also resulted in increase in emission of greenhouse gases, ocean acidification, loss of tropical forest cover, terrestrial biosphere degradation, etc., etc. So unprecedented rise in living standards and comforts that we enjoy today have come with an unparalleled assault on the natural environment. Also, during this period, the global population has increased from around 1 billion to 7 billion people, and perhaps expected to go to 10 billion shortly. So we need to step back and think. It is in this context that renewables becomes important, because we are talking about the viability of the only place we have, which is the earth. There are multiple challenges to renewability, and I will not be talking at length on all of these because I'm sure our chief guest shall be covering those topics. But let me briefly talk about one which to my mind is vitally important. When we think of renewable power, we think of solar, wind, etc. Now, these power sources have certain characteristics, which is they are intermittent in character. What do I mean by intermittent? What I mean is, when there is sun, you can get solar energy. When you have wind, you can get power from wind energy, so on. What do you do with this energy that you generate? You obviously evacuate this energy onto the grid. Now, intermittent sources of power, when you dump onto the grid, there is a limit to which you can dump this. Normally, you can dump about 20 to 25% of intermittent sources of power onto the grid. What happens if you dump more? The grid will fail. There will be a blackout. So what does one do with this power? It's all right to say that you have a lot of renewable sources, but then you're not generating it all the time, number one. Number two is, in order to absorb this power, you require a stable generator. In this case, in case of India, it is fossil fuels, coal or gas and so on. Something which generates power continuously, not intermittently, so that you can load the intermittent sources onto the continuous generators. One way to do it is to have energy storage stations. This could be electrical, this could be mechanical in character. For those of you who are aware, you can have a pump storage project. You can just use this energy to take water, transport water up a hill, so that when you require the power, you draw down that water through a Pelton turbine, generate the electricity you require, and serve. Because our electricity requirements are highly skewed. They are skewed towards the night rather than the day, because it's during the night that we consume a lot of power. So one way to do it is to do it mechanically. The other way to do it is to do it through energy storage stations. They are called BESS, battery energy storage stations. So you store the battery onto the power onto the battery, and then when you require it, you can release it. So now this calls for huge modernization of the grid storage system, the grid that we have today. I'll give you a comparative example. I was attending a seminar in France where there were delegates from the US, and they said the US grid, at the present pace, it will require 140 years to modernize that grid. So you can well imagine the kind of effort which will be required to completely migrate to renewables. Now, the question remains that production of components for renewables, like you require solar cells and so on and so forth. How are you manufacturing these? If you are using fossil power to manufacture the components for renewables, it doesn't really make much sense because you are distributing the pollution over a wider expanse of your country or of the planet. Because you are shifting pollution from cities, let's say, to the areas where you have these power stations located, which are using fossil fuels. So ideally, you would require renewables to generate renewable components, which in turn would feed you. This is a problem of a very, very tall order. And this will require a lot of doing on the part of the government, on the part of the engineers, technologists, to be able to pull this through. So this is not an easy problem. So I thought I'll just talk about one problem. There are hundreds of other problems. I will not say problems, let's call them challenges, because the direction is well set. We have to go towards renewables. I don't think there is an option. We have to find a way to get energy from renewables, because if you look at our country and all countries, we are today a $3.1 trillion economy. We want to become 5, then 20. Somewhere I saw $47 trillion. Every country wants to grow in GDP terms. If you look at the energy growth during this period, it will be multiple times of the GDP growth, because we are becoming an energy-intensive economy. Not only we, the whole world. Today we are talking about AI, generative artificial intelligence. It consumes a humongous amount of power. So per capita consumption of power is going to increase at an accelerated rate. And to feed this power, we require real renewable solutions. Why I say there is no option? Because if we do not convert to renewables, I do not see at least that this planet will last. So therefore, this is an imperative for us. And I'm sure seminars and symposiums like these will help to generate more ideas. And I'm very keen to hear Mr. SARCAR's speech. Hopefully, I can take bits and pieces of that and add to my overall library of wisdom, whatever little I have. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, once again for inviting me. Please enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chakraborty. I think you put it very succinctly, that there is no getting away from the fact that we have to think of renewables if we have to save this planet. May I now take this opportunity of inviting our chief guest, Mr. JAWHAR SIRCAR, to come up on the podium and deliver the R.K. Dutta Memorial Lecture. Mr. JAWHAR SIRCAR. And before that, may I request the other dignitaries on the stage, they can join amongst the audience and face him while he delivers the lecture. Thank you.
General Banerjee, I thought I saw General Roy somewhere. Brigadier Mukherjee, Mr. Chaudhary, Mr. Chakraborty. In fact, Mr. Chakraborty has laid out a very small, compact way for me to proceed. Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed my honor to be speaking to an august body. And when I came back from Delhi, one of the first organizations I got in touch with was SENAS, which was just forming. We require think tanks and neutral think tanks. I stand polluted at this moment, so I can't speak of neutrality, really. But I shall definitely extricate myself. I'm an MP for absolutely no fault of mine. It's, you know, those offers you can't refuse. Like when I was told to speak on a subject for someone who studied history and political science, it becomes very daunting. But then over the last 5 or 6 sessions in Parliament, I made it a point to focus on information. There's an information deficit of a type that is unbelievable. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, I entered the IAS in 1975, and hereinafter, I have never seen such a deliberate, I don't know whether I should use the word suppression, choking, a deliberate non-availability of information. You can't deduce because the information base is something that is choreographed. Now, in that state, how on earth do you proceed to either substantiate or rebut any argument? That becomes difficult. So, Parliament and its questions, which are on oath, can at best be misleading. They can't be really, really off the mark. Or there's still perjury, there's still other remedies. Now, to begin with this, and I find a lot of young citizens, so I'll keep my gear low, medium, so that we get across to each other. There is no doubt that fossil fuels are now contributing about 4/5 of the total greenhouse emissions, 4/5, and that they have to go. The next question is when. So India has been painting or projecting a picture, and I'm not contradicting, but because I belong to that India too, and that we are round the corner. Now we'll get into facts 1, 2, 3. To start with, the target that government set for itself in 2022, 1 year, 1 month ago, was 175 gigawatt from renewable power. Now we'll get to the figures. I don't want to plunge you with figures, but 175 gigawatt was, let us say, an ambitious target going by past performance, and it didn't succeed. It didn't succeed. So let's not blame government as such, because there are a lot of factors that went into renewables. Now, the present capacity, as we know, of October 23, that's why I'm talking about data. There are no announcement that how much have we got, how much have we not succeeded. Present latest data available with me is of 1st October 23, a day before Gandhiji's birthday. And that was 186 gigawatts. So we've crossed that 175 hump a year later, and we're not doing too bad from that point of view. I have incidentally skipped the part why we need renewables and all that, assuming that everybody in this room is in favor. And what exactly constitutes renewables? There is some gray areas. I'll come to it as we move along. Out of this 179, out of 186, 179 came from non-renewable fossil fuels. There are splittings and splittings in the sector that are often very interesting. Very interesting. Like we have about 8 gigawatts from nuclear power. So there is a bit of cloud on that. But then I feel on the balance of options, that's one of the quickest options to go forward. But then it's not my opinion that matters. It's society as a whole we have to take. Now, Mr. Chakraborty, as he said, the major problem with renewable power is its erratic nature. Most of it. Two of our biggest sectors in renewables would be solar and wind. I'll come to the figures later. And solar and wind are both very fluctuating. Both have peak demands and low generation. And it spikes the system, the grid. Right now, so what is the peak demand? Firm figure. What has been the peak demand in India so far? Again, the last figure we have is 243 gigawatts in one day. That means installed capacity notwithstanding, if you could generate and supply 243 gigawatts, you were safe. You had performed. Incidentally, to generate this and supply it on peak demand actually requires a lot of more generation, number one. So it's not 243 that I just somehow touched the base. It requires a lot of more generation, number one, and a lot of more installed capacity. Now here is the trick in power. Comparisons are made on installed capacities. Okay? And generation again is split into 3-4 variables, one of which would be load factor, peak load, average production, and they all have very scientific basis. But how do people like you or me understand? The firm figure is installed capacity. How much do I have the capacity to install? I mean, to generate, if at all it came to that. And it never reaches that infinitely. Never. It can't. There are impossibilities built in. So we find that 243 was a peak demand. And, but that notwithstanding, what is the position now? Now, when you compare 243 to the peak demand and you want to know how much have we progressed, 243 is just a number in your mind, gigawatts. How much did we progress? In 10 years ago, actually 9.5 years ago, it was 133 gigawatts or 134 gigawatts. So to go do that, we have proceeded. This is the degree of progress we have made. And the target is that we are proceeding more on a very contradictory philosophy. We are proceeding more on generation through fossil fuels and capacity building in renewables. That's one contradiction that we are going to live with now for quite some time. India has promised before the world, the Prime Minister has repeated it, and this is repeated in every parliament question, like a mantra in the beginning, like a Sanskrit sloka, that we are committed to install 500 gigawatts by 2030. By 2030. If I live till then, I'll see whether this is possible. See, I am not in a point of ridiculing them, but I'm making a critical assessment, that's all. 500 gigawatts by 2030, and as I had mentioned, our present is 186. So this is the target, and how many years do we have? Count it. 4, 2, so it's going to be about 50 gigawatts of installed capacity, or you just don't meet your target. Past performance does not indicate such progress, but then the gradient is moving up. So we can't hold India back to ransom on past performance that we are poor planner. India has also promised that incidentally out of this 500 gigawatt that we have to reach, it will be 450 of renewables, pure renewable energy, and 50 of non-fossil energy production. I admire the bureaucrats and technocrats who frame the word. And on a clean sweep, you would think that renewables meant everything, because that non-fossil capacity would be contentious areas. Nuclear was one. An emerging area like geothermal is there. Then green hydrogen would be there. So these are not taken in the classical school of renewables. They're kept a little outside. But that accounts for 50 gigawatts. 50 gigawatts is a hell of a lot. The National Electricity Plan has been set up in 2023. And we tend to hold the fossil fuel sector as some sort of rogues in this game when we talk of renewables. But let's be very clear about it. When you talked of R.K. Dutta and his exemplary achievements, they were built on the premise that we have to produce power at any case, at any cost. And today, if we went in for a purist approach to renewables, we'd all be sitting in darkness. So we got to go in for choices. My friend, the Power Minister, he mentioned in Parliament one step ahead from the PM, because 30-30 is sort of branded with PM. So he went one step ahead and said in 31, 32, and this is a statement I'm reading out, that India will have an installed capacity of 900 gigawatts, out of which carbon-free capacity is going to be 627. I would ask him a question for some clarifications on this, because this looks awfully high. So we go back to whenever you ask for power demand, they give their figures in terawatt hours. So we'll not bring in all that confusion, because that's bound to confuse you. What is actually increasing India's demand is that approximately 40 million to 50 million new connections are being given every year. So there has been an extension of the distribution capacities and last mile connectivity. There has been. This generates its own contribution, and we have managed to push ourselves up to the third highest rank in carbon fuels, in fossil fuels. Third highest in CO2 emissions, carbon dioxide emissions. That is what has happened, jumped in about just 4 to 5 years' time. Now, India has a counter argument. You give me a problem like that, as a bureaucrat, I'll rub my hands and say, I'll come back in half an hour. So we have a perfect argument. He said, of course, you're looking at us as a total. Per capita, we are one of the lowest. That's our argument. Per capita, we are one of the lowest, because there are per capita. So, but India has several advantages in renewable power. So far I've been giving a downside picture. One of it is an enormous landmass, abundant sunshine, water movement and others. So, we find that we are still, where renewables are concerned, where greenhouse emissions were concerned, we are third. But where renewables are concerned, we are actually the fastest growing nation. We need to commend, we are actually the fastest growing nation where renewable is concerned. Hang on. In capacity. And as Mr. Chakraborty has explained, capacity is only one side of the story. Because if you have power that's inherently tripping, you don't use it until you come to solutions. So I'll just touch a few of these issues. Where RE, renewable energy, is concerned, we are fourth in the world. Not bad. We are the fourth in the world, except again for a fact. Our last tag was 163 gigawatt of renewable at that point of comparison. We didn't go up to 186, okay? When we were 163, China was exactly 1161. So you understand the scale of comparison. So the first boy is far ahead, and there's a lot of space. USA is just double of India's. So, but we have done a lot of catching up. There's no doubt about it. We have done, but as he said, that will take how many years? 140 years for USA to modernize. 140 years to modernize. So these are facts that we have to take it before we start dreaming that we'll be completely out of this racket. And when I address this, I address it to the generation that demands and says, now that you have soiled our atmosphere, destroyed our atmosphere, when on earth will you clean it up so that we can live like humans? They're entitled to ask that question. When I referred to the first target of 175, the result was minus 32%. Now we come to the target for renewables and how far it's going. We'll get in sector-wise, and then you'll understand why we can't make it. I mean, there is no dearth of intention or effort. There's dearth of understanding the facts behind it. Solar has seen unprecedented growth. Solar energy. Unprecedented growth, but it's completely skewed Actually solar has become so high, it skewed the performance of the entire RE sector, and it's the most variable energy. You don't get it for much of the time. You don't get it at that strength. So why on earth do we talk in terms of having huge capacities and going for huge investments if we can't have a distribution policy in position? And I'll come to the problem of grid later. Solar structures represented 89% of the renewable installations in 22. The last year that we account for, almost 90% came from solar. It surpassed its capacity, but as I said, we'll touch upon grid little later. Hydro, the next biggest area. Hydro, incidentally, was one of our darlings when we were growing up. I remember going and seeing the romance of Maithon, the surge of power, the capping of water, etc. Hydro is the next biggest villain after coal. It's the next biggest villain after coal because it's the largest emitter of methane and at least 30 times more potent carbon dioxide. 30 times. Actually, the range given to me is 28 to 34 times more potent than carbon dioxide. The methane production that accompanies rotting matter materials with hydro actually takes the wind out of our sails. I'll tell you why. One of the most effective means of storage of excess power and surge was pumped storage. Use all the energy, pump it up. If you get a convenient hill, we have one in Purulia, pump it all up and then drain the water down to put in thermal power when you require it. Brilliant idea, costly but brilliant idea, and it's worked. But today, hydro is taken as a rogue that may be actually bigger than thermal. Not only that, hydroelectric power and the dams have been ecologically disturbing, especially in the fragile ecosystems of the Himalayas and the Northeast. So you can be dead sure that if you have a dam here, it will cause some ripple somewhere else and the flash floods and everything that follow. So when COP26 began, 300 organizations from 69 countries, 300 organizations like yours and even bigger, petitioned the COP that please abandon this false climate solution. So there goes solar, there goes hydro. But what was India's policy? India did not include hydro as a renewable power in the beginning. It was only in 2019, the second phase of this current government, that hydro was included. Number one, it makes statistics look good. If you put it under renewable, you can show a lot of increase, but that's not the only thing. Hydro has some advantages. It is pretty stable as a source of power. So when the grid fluctuations begin and you have a lot of hydro in the grid, it sort of takes in the shock. So it helps stabilize the grid. So there's a plus point. The other plus point is Northeast and Himalayan region where development is so difficult. This is one of the sure shot developments. So why are you depriving them? So there are these arguments that they lead to development, but as I said, it's like coal. It comes with its price tag, this one with notoriously high levels of methane and proven disturbances in the ecosystem. So wind installations, we fall behind on wind installations. Do you remember Tanti, who was going in for a lot of wind installations about 15 years ago? Poor chap died, but he did a lot of work. But wind installation capacity is certainly not going up. Because again, it is an intermittent source of energy, number one. You require large chunks of land. They look like Eiffel Towers or look like Don Quixote's windmills. but they are not as funny. They take a lot of land. Cabling takes a lot of land, so people have objection to so much land acquisition, and turbines are very expensive. So you do it basically with imported turbines. So these are the minus points of wind. But then wind also is a very cheap source of power, but is intermittent, like solar, wind. So we have been depending on solar and wind. Fall back on something that I was taught when I was a sub-divisional officer. And when I told my wife this, she went on rollicking and said, what a lovely job you've got now. This was gobar gas. Okay, we used the word gobar gas at that time. It was later dignified into biogas. Biogas. We used to go from village to village, clumps of this thing, get hold of cattle, smelly cattle, and see where they emitted the holy stuff and how it was all channeled, the slurry as it's called, and then how it fell into the pit. We had to actually see it and supervise it because we had targets. Biogas, I'm talking about 1977, 80, it's a solution. India has so much cattle, and India's cattle is going on increasing. The refuse of the cattle, which is for now very holy and can be packaged, would be used as slurry, and the slurry would putrefy, and the putrefaction would lead to gases, and these gases would run everything. Actually, I've seen it run everywhere. This would reduce greenhouse gases, utilize organic wastes. Fair enough. We have been using it in the form of, cow dung plates all over, GOVT and all that, but who cares? So this is the better way of using it. But construction of biogas plants are very costly for each farmer. So we went in for heavy subsidy. There was heavy cheating, so leaking and this thing is part of how government operates. But the trouble was that they started failing because you have to have an expert calibrating the fermenter, as it call it, with the monitoring gas emissions. And where on earth do you find a professional expert to go to every village? So we created cycle bands and everything, but coming to the end of it, the biogas is not only smelly around the place, it's smelly all over the place. So those who were not using biogas said, to hell with it, we don't want your pollution. What they call the anaerobic breakdown problem. So went in for ocean-based. The best part of the ocean-based ones that is emerging now is on hydrogen, green hydrogen. Hydrogen has been produced from water and other methods in the past, but they were using polluting or energy from polluting sources to create energy from non-polluting sources. It's like you driving an EV car, electric vehicle, you're charging on thermal energy. So what on earth are you? Just transferring the problem. But now green gas productions have reached such a stage when it can be on pure water on renewable energy basis. So one is known as, if you make it from coal, it is known as green hydrogen. And this one is, if you make it from coal, it is grey hydrogen. And if you make it from here, if you make it from natural gas, it becomes blue hydrogen. So they have different terms. This is one area where there is a potential. It will lead to monopolies. Right now, it's a public sector that's playing the game with only Reliance as the biggest player. It's GAIL that's actually playing the game. GAIL is there, RS is there. So others are all in this game. But Reliance is also a player. But what happens in this uneven competition, as happened in telecom, the one player or a couple of players outwit the others. Whatever it is, I'm not getting to the economics and politics of that. Green hydrogen can actually change the game. This is one area which is very small now. We're now on very small ratios, but there is scope. The other area where you can tap green energy is geothermal. We don't have an awful lot of geysers, Taptabani, but right now breakthrough has been made in Puga Valley, Chumak Thang in Jammu and Kashmir, Manikaran in Himachal. There are spots where we have hot water, but total energy target has not been fixed up. So geothermal is another area. I'll now come to the issues and problems. We have already covered many of the problems and issues. One is inadequate funding. Touch upon it a little later. Terribly fluctuating production, which doesn't happen in the fossil fuels or in the bad boys of renewable energy. Third is grid balancing. Remember, if what Mr. Chakravarti said is it will take 140 years for the US to change its grid. Imagine how much it would take India. Because the last 6 years, 5 to 6 years of sustained renewable energy production just cannot be handled by this grid. This grid is a legacy grid that is tied to thermal and is used to thermal. It's not compatible with spikes. It can't be. And to change it all around, but then government goes ahead and says, no, we have linked 117 gigawatts in one frequency, one nation. Everything is one nation and all that. So they have said that they have done it. I said, but how is it that, okay, you built the highway. Where are the cars? I don't see too much of it. The traffic problems remain. So grid reliability is one of them, a major one. Grid would depend on DISCOMs, the distribution companies. They are the ones who maintain the grid. I don't know of a single DISCOM that is not deep in the red. I don't know. So, Titha, is there any DISCOM in India, distribution company in India, unless it's cooking its accounts? Huh? Okay. I invited Mr. Shotitha Bhattacharya, who was chairman of Coal India and now chairman of the Electricity Regulatory Authority. So, the point is, maybe one of the dozens and dozens of distribution companies, whether state or central or private. And the private are doing worse. Every now and then the private sector is blackmailing the government, I don't mince words, into saying that my distribution collapse if you don't give me this relief. And these are located in 5 states only, including his state of Andhra Pradesh, who just simply blackmailed and said, my grid is not going to function unless I give this, I can't lift power, which means government on its way is trying a two-pronged method with the grids. First is come to agreements, evacuation, extraction agreements. If you don't do it, I'll penalize you. And if you're a good boy, I'll give you a chocolate. It's trying to balance the grid because most of the grid is in their sector. So grid is promising to be the biggest issues. But then there's a question we are all missing out. The target is to get out of coal. Great. What do you do with the existing infrastructure, with the existing country called coal? Coal is a culture. Coal is a country in itself. So you have employment, you have pilfering employment, you have mining issues, problem, machinery, transportation, livelihood, rehabilitation. The entire thing on its own. You can't go proceed on renewables and say, Tata, goodbye, thermal. It won't work that way. You'll have to come back and compensate it out. So every cost has to be drawn back, is being pulled back by these factors. But there is, again, as I said, a silver lining. There's a new grid system called RES GGS, forget the names, it's renewable energy source grid. Grid meant for renewable energy that can take in a lot of spiking. This one is coming into position, just about started. It'll enhance power extraction, but then it's very costly to install. And whoever installs it would need a guarantee from someone that I'll get so much power on it. So you have the DISCOM saying that, I can't use it. You have the solar powers and others are saying, you're building it for us, no? We'll think about it. So you can't work in this atmosphere. You can't work with each player looking the other way, like political parties saying, we may not agree on seats. I mean, you can't go in free for all everywhere. So we have to come up with a solution and look again into the tariff. That's one issue I've not raised at all, because that itself will require another lecture on how tariffs are worked out. Now, another issue relating to renewable power is that there are only 10 states that have renewable power of any variety. I mean, of any consequence. And 10 states are 5 southern states. 5 ne kitna ho gaya? 6. Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra, Telangana. Kerala has. Kerala is still there. It's there. So 5.5. So whatever you say, for those 5 states and the Sukha states. You can imagine which one they are. Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, these are the ones that have it. So we used to look upon dry, arid, whistling, Gabbar Singh land as a liability. Gabbar Singh landscape, and now we find that is more interesting where power is concerned. But then, and 66% of the target came from Gujarat, Rajasthan, Telangana. So there is a national imbalance. Now this national imbalance is not for socialism. Everybody needs power. So how do you transfer from the surplus state to the deficit state? There are a few deficit states. So there are problems that are coming up with huge surplus generation and installed capacity in Gujarat and Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh. They are now competing with saying that you have to restrict coal. Now coal investment has already gone in and you're not taking a frontal decision, will I marry this girl or will I marry that girl? You're still playing around with both. We have to come to these hard choices as we move along. Finance, I had touched upon. The requirement is will require about $80 billion to produce 50 gigawatts for the next 5 years. Yahi se bilao. $80 billion is the estimate of the International Energy Authority. Much of it will come also on its own. Much of it will come because they are linked with the banking system and the financing system. Government stability and overall decision making. Running with both now. You have no choice because if you boycott thermal today, you'll be dead. So you are going in for more thermal power, more thermal building now. And you are also going with renewable. At some point, you'd have to take the choice. And see how government policies affect. In April 22, renewable installations, power generation slowed down. Why? Because of some silly order that came out from the Finance Ministry on basic customs duties on certain components. It caused chaos all over, and then by July it was withdrawn. In that time, we lost so much power. I mean, there is no integrated thinking. No, absolutely no integrated thinking. Right now, solar tariff auctions have reduced prices drastically, but that is not enough. You have to go in for offtake agreements. If I build provisions, you have to take it from me. I can't build and be a sitting duck. You have to enforce renewable purchase obligations. These are just coming up. This policy regime is just about coming up now. You have to make PPA, power purchase agreements, as bankable. They are bankable, but with clauses. These are financing options that we have to go at. And mercifully or interestingly, the government's biggest subsidy scheme called PLI, Production Linked Incentive, has come in for solar PV module manufacturing. So solar PV module manufacturing is going to be an import substitution program, but as you can see, it will benefit practically one. These have to come in. There is immense scope, which I started and I'll be ending now, on R&D. We have no perfect solution. I remember as once tax commissioner, and while addressing the tax officers, tax officers, they kept on saying this case is failing, that case is failing, this case is plaguing us. And I said, shall I tell you something in secret in an auditorium of 700? Law is basically an attempt, mark my words, an attempt to govern human relationship, a particular area. Whether a person with other inclinations can cohabit with someone legally or within bonds of marriage is an area of human relationship, and law is an attempt to get it. Right now, as you can see, we are going up and down on that issue. Sometimes we are saying it's legit, sometimes we are saying it's not there, tomorrow somebody will bring in a law. So it's just an attempt going on. And financial laws are biggest attempts to revenue laws, as you put it, to govern that human relationship. If you can get away with it, you've got away. If you can get away with it, you've got away. I have the finance secretary sitting, former finance secretary sitting, looking grimly at me. It's basically, I'm summarizing it for you, that I don't look upon this with great sacredness. I keep saying, keep shuffling your hand, whichever works best is best. That's all. So here we have great scope for R&D and battery. I don't know how much will succeed on the battery part, but someday I've got to listen to it. As an American analyst has said, remember that the modern day markets do not arise spontaneously. Not even for any product. They are crafted by individuals and by firms, it's Vogel, and assisted by governments. The complex relations within capitalist economies just can't be looked away from. There are very complex relations, and not all of it can be reduced to two words, cronyism and all. It doesn't work that way. There are too many obligations to be. Now, when we come to an overall view, we find that there's a group that keeps saying that 2030 we have said 500 gigawatts. At the present rate, if you install 500 gigawatts also, you will not be able to extract more than 31% of the overall pie. So that's the bottom line we are waiting for. 2030 is my great year that I'm relieved. Renewable power reaches thermal power and polluting power. Clean power tackles polluting power. But at the rate of utilization and generation production, we will not be crossing 31-32%. That means in 2030, 68% of power will still be from thermal and polluting sources. That is the reality of India. We made a tremendous stride from what we started in 200 to 2010 and all that, tremendous stride, no doubt about it. Re-emphasis, the boat has been turned around. But it just doesn't work out. It's not working out. Grid is choking us, finance is not coming in through, balancing is not happening, monopoly production in some areas. So that is the bottom line on which we need to be bothering about. I have read out from my speech, but I have not read out a single word from my speech, but the last para I'll read out because I have to be careful. That's all, because we would, however, be rather simplistic in our analysis if we end without touching upon political realities and the political economy of capitalism. and not gauge the power of economics. What I simply mean is what are the relationships that either help or hinder. The best index that I use is Adani. He is some sort of a lead indicator to me. I keep doing it. One of my colleagues lost a job, but never mind. If he makes me lose mine, I'll be happier coming back to Senas and others. Now, what's happening is the biggest player in the private part of the thermal sector is again Adani. He operates through a system called MDO, all coin terms, mine developer and operator, which simply means that our zamindars used to employ a class in the villages called jodhars. They leased it out, and the jodhar would be going there with his muscleman and say, "Boss, I've got this extraction, so when do we meet?" I mean, he's the guy who would actually pick it up. So the dirty part of the coal job, tackling villagers, beating them up, etc., deciding on this, that part he's doing. His interest, or that group's interest in coal, is staggering in the private sector, and it's going up day by day, and no rules are there. I can go on naming coal mine after mine where PRASAR came. I can go on naming where environmental blockades didn't work, something else happened, etc. But the biggest operator in solar and other forms of renewable energy is again Adani. So, which one will succeed is what we need to look about. Which one will succeed is what we need to look at. Because right now, like government, he's also putting his bets on both sides. So we haven't reached the junction. We haven't reached the crossroad yet. The conclusive remark that I'll make is that at present calculations, we are about to reach. We may touch 50% in installed capacity, but generated capacity cannot cross 32% in the next 6 years unless there is a tremor and a sea change, unless green oxygen suddenly builds up, unless storage capacities are built in, unless there is a factor that we can't see. Right now, I am basing on this thing. So 3268 is what I see of 2030, given the tremendous pressures that government has already put in. We now have to see, we are only in 24, and there's a beautiful sentence which used to apply in politics. Harold Wilson had said, because people just asked me when I was coming about 24 elections, I said, we can't. He said, no, everybody's saying somebody's going to win. I said, maybe. But Harold Wilson had said, 1 week is a long time in politics. So 1 year is a long time in the economy. We have 6 years where certain turns may go. But right now, I had to cut through a lot of clutter to come to the down-end figure, because this 32 is not ever committed or said or analyzed or reported by government. It is only on the basis of construction of data, interpolation of data, interaction of data, that you come to it, and various slips here and there. You work on performance capacity, present capacity, and come to the fact that approximately 32. I only hope I am wrong. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, post this lecture, I am sure whenever we talk about or think of renewable energy and the various issues that are linked to it, you'll now get a fairly good idea of what we are in for. I am reminded of only two things. One is, if you recollect your good old days when Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was being read by all of us. And then we went on to suddenly find that yes, he prophesied and what the submarines and other things which you found. Again, is the nuclear area going to be something which will really I mean, you know that France at one point of time went the whole hog insofar as nuclear energy was concerned. It is now having second thoughts. But there is an article I read the other day, which was absolutely a fun article, which said that you will be probably getting into an area where most of your gadgets and most of your shipping, your railways, your aviation will be run on nuclear pellets. I do not know if this is going to be just something of a scientific imagery, or is it going to last off into something which we in our lifetime might see. Once again, please join me in giving a big hand to Mr. Jawhar for a wonderful exposition insofar as this renewable energies is concerned. I'm sure between Mr. Chakraborty and Mr. SARCAR, we all have a fairly good idea of where we are heading insofar as this renewable energy is concerned. We are running strictly according to time. I will now request Mr. Chaudhary to please come up on the podium for just about 5 minutes and moderate a Q&A with the speaker. And if you have any questions we have persons in the audience who can also take them on. And please be brief and ask your doubts if you have any. Thank you.
So we can start the Q&A. My request is, number one, please introduce yourself and keep your questions brief. The house is open.
I'm Harki Sidhu. I wanted to know that 30 to 68, is this the best scenario? I mean,
As of now, this looks like it.
okay.
You know, it's like driving through a blizzard. So when your windscreen clears, you see for a moment. It's very complicated. We know the fixed capacities. We know the rate at which they are going up. We see each year's approvals, investments. And right now in 24, looking at 30, it does not appear that we may reach 500 gigawatts. That's not the major issue. But the demand is going up and thermal will also cross it. So thermal being more stable and the grid being accustomed to thermal, and thermal being connected to many other socio-economic problems of wide areas, it can't get away. Thermal is now at the receiving end at the management level. No villages, no districts and others connected with thermal have yet expressed their political opinion so far. Thermal is not a political issue. But once we start closing down and this becomes a political issue, it will, we can't avoid a confrontation between the two sources at some point.
Thank you very much.
My name is Ashok Dasgupta. I've been in power sector for last, I don't know how many years, 40, 45 years. How are you? So I'm the president of Independent Power Producers Association of India, based in Delhi. And we are dealing with power all the time. And we have conferences. I think Sudipto knows us very well. So one question I want to ask you, you have given an overall picture of what's happening in the power sector. You talked about all energy. There's one particular scope where power is available, what we call blue economy. The energy which is there in the ocean. What are your views on that? Because we have been discussing this quite a lot. I've been speaking on this, on blue economy. And there is a project in Gujarat. They are trying to extract as much power possible from the waves of the sea. You know, waves have that reciprocating effect, you know. And so there's a lot of energy in the ocean, which is a renewable energy. What is your opinion on this? Energy available in the ocean.
Tidal power has been one of the first sources of tapping power. It didn't work out so far, but if they have come up with new technologies in Gujarat, tidal power is one of the earliest sources that we started tapping.
It is working very well in the Scandinavian countries. In Denmark, Sweden, it's coming up very, very well. The tidal power.
Tidal power will have its own sets of issues.
Also, besides tidal power, the temperature difference that you have in ocean at a level, ground level, the bottom level, that difference of temperature you can use to produce power. That's another source of energy which ocean has. I think we should do some more research.
I just briefly touched upon R&D and touched about green hydrogen and others, because there are issues. Battery was one of them. Battery is one of them, storage. We'll have to come up with more and more. And there's a lot of study going on. adapting to Indian conditions going on. But our coastline is completely chock-a-block full of habitats. That's another issue. We'll see. I am hopeful on green hydrogen. Though it'll lead to monopolies and all that, let it lead. But green hydrogen may actually work.
No, I think as a country we have done quite well. Not because I'm from the...
No, we have done...
We have done very, very well. And if you compare where we are in the neighboring countries, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, even, Myanmar. And
no, we're not comparing there. We are comparing with ourselves.
Yes.
We are comparing with ourselves. I have been part of UPA too. Very much part of that. That was not my subject, but one keeps knowing the issues. We've done this government has done very well in turning the focus on.
And almost everyone in our country has a source of power in his house. Almost everyone. Not
everyone.
100%, but almost everyone.
That's the last point. That's a bit of cheating, but never mind.
No, but most of them, it's tremendous achievement I think we've got in India as a power.
We have to we'll require a breakthrough. We'll require a breakthrough either in green hydrogen or in looking at oceanic power in a completely different light. Forget tidal energy, going for others or differential.
You were mentioning all the figures in gigawatt. We mentioned in megawatt most of the time, Same
So I reduced everything to gigawatt because it was coming to 7 digits. And I said, I'm not going to speak it.
You are avoiding megawatt, you are going by gigawatt only.
Because gigawatts are more handy. I have to add 3 more digits to that every time. So I said, no way. I do that for Arab crores.
I am Major General S.N. Mukherjee. I have just one thing, the policy on, there is a need of certain uniform policy throughout India as far as the distribution companies are concerned. Sometimes they are actually doing differently. For example, in the state of West Bengal and Calcutta Electricity Corporation and the Bihar or Madhya Pradesh, the type of facilities there we are getting, the type of facilities we are getting, for if it's residential you want to convert or any company or factories you want to install solar system, the policies are different. And there was a time there was a case in Calcutta High Court for 2 years. There was no decision taken on this policy. So there is a requirement of, I think, going into a little bit of more policy where the solar system will be more, people, those who want also, they are not getting the benefit as in other state. West Bengal is one of the state where we are suffering.
I'll talk to you and get more information on this.
I am Colonel Amit Mukhopadhyay speaking. I just want to ask you one question, sir. We are very happy with the scenario comparison to Myanmar, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and other countries. Would you kindly tell me, sir, in a scale of 1 to 10, in a scale of 1 to 10, 1-10, where do we stand vis-a-vis China and USA?
So there are complete differences in approach. It's a hard, ruthless technocrat decided government. So they are far ahead. Even in green hydrogen, before we started, they are far ahead. With China, it will be difficult to so-called compete because their energy needs are also different. At the same time, with all the credit that China has in developing, it's the largest polluting country, one of the largest. It still pollutes, so it needs to do something. With the US, we are in a happier position. It's a slothy giant now, when we are much more nimble. And there has been a lot of focus, as I keep saying, when the Ministry of NRES, was called that time, non-renewable energy sources, I think it's still called with the same name, was set up. It took a lot of time to vision out where are we going. It was quite, we are in a better position now. I am not, as you know, an apologist for the government. I remain a critic. I can go into criticism, but that's not the whole issue. The issues are, I have to glean out some issues and place it to you. There are lots of fudging going on also. But that notwithstanding, there has been progress. But I wish somebody got into the, what I call the interministerial issues. Interministerial issues. They remain unresolved. As I gave you an example, between renewable power and between customs. There's absolutely no coordination.
So I'm quoting you, sir. You told a very important point. Unforeseen factor which may come. In the last phase of switch, something unforeseen which may change the balance totally.
Yes.
Now, this particular topic, I thank you so much to enlighten me. It's almost a new topic to me. Unless this becomes a household topic to discuss, the whole system may not be very proactive. Again, I'm repeating, sir, unforeseen and proactive, sir. What I am understanding, I go home with this take that is still in a very hypothetical stage. I may be wrong. Please correct me.
Anyone among the younger group? Yes, please.
So my name is Pooja Kumari Gupta. So I want to ask you the question, what are the potential economic and social benefits of successfully transitioning to a low carbon economy? What would benefit in the social and economic way if we'll adapt this renewable power? Would it be more economic for India, and also it will help our society?
You see, it's a completely different techno-economy. So new job skills are coming up. Even the government has put in a lot of new job skills in what we call green energy, in green technologies. So that's one shift of the skills that are going to happen. There'll be vast shift of power. Here I mean power means as in socio-political power, because the traditional areas of coal would have to be junked. It may be junked at 2070, but at some point we have to junk it all. So which means that the populations who are connected with it would have to be dealt with. So there will be de-employment there, re-employment somewhere else. These factors will come up, but as of now, thermal power is, as of now, renewable power can be cheaper. You see, power is an artificial costing. So first thing, don't look at Calcutta, which is one of the highest per unit cost. It's all artificial. It's permitted, therefore it is there. Power will depend on a lot of competition also. I spoke about power auctions. So cost of power will, in my opinion, go down with more renewables. Certainly will go down with more renewables. Employment will go up in some areas, but go drastically down in other areas, both the fuel and the fuel-based thermal plants. So there'll be shifts. I wish I had Jules Verne's way of looking at life. Too much of a bureaucrat to think beyond that point.
Today's event, as you know, was sponsored by our corporate member, Numaligarh Refinery Limited, a Government of India undertaking, which was established on 22nd April 1993 in accordance with the provisions made in the historic Assam Accord on 15th August 1985. This refinery was dedicated to the nation by former Prime Minister late Atal Bihari Vajpayee on the 9th of July 1999. The refinery has now embarked on a major integrated refinery project to treble its capacity from 3 million metric tons per annum to 9 million metric tons per annum at an investment of over 28,000 crores. So while on the one side we are talking about renewable energy, on the other side fossil fuels are also seeing a quantum jump. This PSU though is a very vibrant, growth-oriented energy company of national standing, geared to making the expectation of all stakeholders. And our late Ranjit Kumar Dutta was the first managing director of Numaligarh Refinery Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, I take this opportunity to thank you all for being a wonderful audience. A special thanks to the Army Institute of Management, these young postgraduates who have now come here today to listen to this memorial lecture. I'm sure they will be exploring the avenues of going into the corporate world in the renewable energy areas, and it will give you an insight into what is in store for you hereafter. I would also like to thank the Bengal Club and their very helpful management and staff who made it possible for us to conduct this event without a hitch. Normally we have this select gathering of a very small gathering, and we find it very convenient to hold this memorial lecture at the Bengal Club premises. SIRCAR also wishes to thank Mr. Subir Chakraborty, he just left us, the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Exide Industries Limited, who accepted our request to help us in introducing the subject of our lecture and discussion to the audience and setting the stage, so to say, for the memorial lecture which Mr. JAWHAR SIRCAR has just delivered. Finally, on behalf of the President and members of SIRCAR, I place on record our grateful thanks to our Chief Guest, Mr. JAWHAR SIRCAR, who consented to address us today in spite of the short notice that we gave him and in spite of his extremely busy schedule. May I request our President, Mr. General Mukherjee, to please come up, sir, on the podium and present a certificate, a letter of appreciation and a token honorarium to Mr. SIRCAR. A big hand to our chief guest. And with this, we come to the end of the proceedings. A final thank you to our chief guest and to all of you for being a wonderful audience. Thank you and Jai Hind.